Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to set up all the code for our character panel. In this case, we're going to make sure that we can have our HP be updated based on the player's HP, as well as set up our stats to be drawn where all these power 22 things are. In this case, we're not going to have many stats, and we have all this room, so you can have as many stats as you want, or your UI can be a different size, entirely different shape, whatever. But in my case, we'll probably have like power and then defense and what else do we have? Vitality or something like that. I don't know, but you can have as many as you want. And they're just going to be simple text elements that are prefabs that we're going to instantiate and then update with the information from our stats. And then when we equip a weapon, we're going to fire an event that the UI is going to listen for, and it's going to update all of the information based on what stats the weapon has, then also the icon. And then we're going to add a way to unequip the weapon by clicking on the icon that will then go through a couple of things to unequip the weapon. And the level is going to stay the same until we actually have a level. We may go ahead and set up the event so we can fire the event whenever we have a level system and we already have the event in place. So it'll start updating the UI right whenever we set that up. Should be no problem. We're going to take a simple approach to this. We're going to make some properties that are accessible in the UI or in the inspector, and then we're just going to drag and drop a few things, keep it all nice and simple because we have a lot of stuff to work with in this. So I don't want to go through and gather everything through code and have the first 20 minutes of this be typing out the code for gathering all that. If you want to do it that way, I've done that in this series. I've done that in a couple series in the past. There's just so many different ways of grabbing references to objects. In this case, we're going to be using the inspector, which is a very Unity way to do it, and a lot of actual coders don't like to do it that way. But if you watch the rest of the series, you know that I don't really either. It's just easier in this case because we have a lot of stuff to work with, and it'll be easier and quicker to do on video. So we're going to do that. So the first thing I want to do is let's go into Visual Studio. Did I have an error? No. Also, before we begin, I have updated, finally. I know some of you thought I was crazy for being on 5.3.4 or whatever for so long. Honestly, I was just worried about updating because I didn't want to break anything that I'd have to fix. But the auto API updater thing that it runs did a pretty good job. I didn't have to fix anything, I don't think. So that's pretty cool. I'm sure most of you are already on 5.6 point something at this point, so doesn't really matter what changed because you already have that changed. But nothing, I didn't have to change any code or anything, so that worked out pretty good. But we're going to start off in, let's see, what do I have up here? The UI event handler. All we currently have is the item added to inventory event. And one I know I'm going to need is, one, it works with item like we do here, but it's going to be, why don't I have this like this? I prefer to have the delegate above the event so we have it defined before we use it. One thing I know I'm going to need is whenever the item is equipped. So we'll do the same thing here, event. It's going to be item event handler using the same delegate, same signature. And it's going to be, let's see, on item equipped. And I could say weapon because we know we're only working with weapons, but maybe you have other things in yours. So that's fine. So on item equipped, and this is going to be, the handler for this is going to be something like item equipped. Something simple, item. And then we're going to call unequipped and pass it item. The same way we did here, exact same thing, just a different one. So now whenever we equip a weapon, we'll call this handler, it's going to call this event. That's going to go through the delegate and say, hey, all these things get called now, please. And that's what we want. So I can now listen for this in the UI, and in my player weapon controller, I can call this whenever it happens. So I can do it at the end, right? There's nothing stopping me from doing that. Yeah, we changed all this recently, didn't we? Cool. I think that's all good. So if I were to go through the UI event handler and go to item equipped, just like that, and then pass it the item to equip. So the current item that we're trying to equip, it's going to pass that to the UI whenever we get that hooked up, and it's going to know, okay, so I equipped this weapon, here's the stats, here's the icon. Okay, so the next thing I want to set up is another event that's going to handle updating whenever see, whenever the health changes will be the next one we can do. So that was going to require another handler, another delegate here. And it's just going to be when the player health changes. We don't have necessarily a health system in our game. There's no unified health system. It's just each thing kind of has its own health and handles its health separately. And you may have it handled differently in yours, but in ours, that's how it is. So in our case, we only care about whenever the player's health changes. Maybe if you have a health system, you'll have one that's universal, that it updates whenever any health changes, and it looks for a certain object's health, and it updates its health bar or whatever. In our case, it's just going to be the player. So I'm going to do another delegate here, and it's going to be player health event handler. And it's going to take we could do this in a couple of ways. I think I will handle it by doing an integer for the max health, and then an integer for the current, or do it the other way. Current health, and then an integer for the max health. And you probably notice that I like to spell things out. Some people might put like CUR health or CH and then MH. I don't like doing that. It just causes me headaches in the future whenever I have to understand what I was saying 6 months ago. So just type it out, right? I mean, that's not going to take any more of anything to do. Just do it. So then I'll create an event. It's going to be a player health event handler, and it's going to be on player health changed. I'm using added and equip, so it should be changed. And then we'll have a method to call right here that's going to be called health changed. And then we'll call the on player health changed event. And it's looking for a integer of max health, and an integer for current health. And then we're going to pass that into here as max health, and then current health. Cool. Looks good. So now whenever we update our health on the player, we can call this event and it will update anything that's listening for it. In our case, just the UI, at least for now. And then we'll also have another one. It's not going to be health. We're going to have a stat updating thing happening. So whenever our stats change, so if we equip a weapon or we, I don't know, level up or something, maybe we'll change our stats for the character. So we'll have to update the UI for that. So to do that, we'll just say we have another one here. This could be an issue where we have a player stat change event that relates to the health as well as the stats as well as the equipped weapon, but our health is separate from our stats because our stats are attributes. Our stats are modifiers of other things, and health is not a modifier, right? So you can have your health as a stat very easily, but I do not. And if you did, you would also just update that whenever you update the other stats. But in our case, not happening here. So I'm going to do another, it's going to be, what can I call this one? It's whenever the stats change. So player stats change event handler. Ooh. I'm just going to get rid of player on that. And not stats change, just for the event name. There we go. Stats event handler. I don't like having handler in the name. It's fine. I don't need to go refactoring anything right now. So if I were to then update this, what does it need to know? It doesn't need any arguments, any parameters, because it's going to have a reference to the player, therefore to have a reference to the player's stats already. So whenever I update it, it'll just say, okay, well, I'm going to grab a new copy of that reference that I have and then draw out the stats in the UI. So it doesn't need any information other than, hey, something happened, right? So I'm going to do a public static event. It's going to be called stats event handler, first of all. I'm going to call it on stats changed. And the reason we have, let's say we have 3 different delegates, right? You may seem like we're writing a bunch of delegates, but we're not really. I mean, we're in the very low end of a lot of what messaging systems will be using. But in our case, we don't use a lot of messages for a lot of things yet. But the reason we have this as we do so far is that each delegate is going to have its own signature, right? As you can see, this one takes in, it's a different name and it takes in different parameters, as well as this one takes in no parameters. And it also contains, in a sense, a list of different methods, right? So it's a map of different methods that gets called whenever something says, hey, do something with those methods. So each one contains different things that are listening for it. So if we only used 1 or 2 for things that we should have 4 or 5 different things doing, we'd have to do filtering on the other end and be like, okay, well, I got this event, but now I need to make sure that it's what I'm looking for. If we handle it separately, we know that, okay, so this event fired, I know I'm listening for that specific event for only one reason, so I can do what I know I need to do. Keeps it simple, keeps it clean. So that's nice. So I'll take this and I'll copy it. And it's going to be stats changed. It doesn't need any, just like that. And this will be on stats changed. Okay, cool. Another one we need, we have the weapon being equipped, the health, the stats handler. We also will update, not in this video because we don't have a reason to, but we'll also probably have the player's level update, not the level update, but the UI for the level update this way. So player level event handler. And I'm not necessarily sure what it will need. Since we'll have the reference to the player, I don't guess we'll need to pass it another reference to the player. It may be cleaner just to pass it what our current level is and our experience and the required experience, but I think it'll be easier in the end if we just keep the reference to the player and then just update that reference whenever the event is fired. So we'll just do that. So there's nothing needed for this, and it's going to be the player level handler, and then I'm going to, what is this going to be called? On player level. Yeah, something like that. And then we'll just create another handler right here. Player leveled, maybe? Leveled. Is that how you spell leveled? Leveled? No, leveled. And then we'll do on player level. Cool. So that should be all the messaging that we need to do between our code and the UI. So now all we have to do is write the other stuff that handles everything else, and that's quite a bit of stuff. So we're going to get into that. Let's think about this from a zoomed out perspective really fast. What do we need? Okay, so we need a reference from our UI to our code, or to the code that's going to handle the UI. Not the actual game logic, but the code that's going to handle the UI stuff for our character panel. It needs to know what the text is for the health and the level. It needs to know what the fill bar is for the health and the level. It needs to know what the prefab for the text elements are for our stats. And then it needs to know the icon, the text for the sword, and then the prefabs for our weapon stats. And that's what it needs. It also needs to know the parents for these things. So that's a lot of things, right? That's why I said I'm going to just wire them up in the inspector to save some time and make it a bit easier to follow along with, probably. If I go to my scripts, and I'm just going to create one in here. It's going to be a C# script, obviously, and I want to call it character panel. Okay, then I'm going to attach this to my panel character. Cannot be found. Oh, it's compiling, sorry. Compile, there we go. Attach this to my panel character. So now what I want to do is, I don't need this, I don't need that, I don't need that, I don't need that, I don't need that, don't need that, don't need that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is set up a couple references first, then we'll get into using those references. So let's think about this. I said I need a reference to the texts for the level and the HP, so we can go ahead and do that. And do these need to be, we've not went over this before, for simplicity's sake, but do these need to be in the inspector? Yes. Check. Do they need to be publicly available to other objects? And probably some of them, right? But let's think about our level and our HP text. So they don't need to be. So private, and then it's going to be text, but then I'm going to have to use the Unity Engine UI namespace, so I have to define that every time. Engine.ui. And it's going to be text, and I'm just going to be looking for the health and the level. I can do the comma to say, say I have two things here that are the exact same. They are their own objects, but it's easier to define them this way. And then that's not going to show up in my inspector because it's set to private, and Unity only naturally serializes to the inspector things that are publicly exposed. So if I wanted to take this and say, hey, this is fine to serialize, I can do a serialize field on that, and it'll be like, oh, okay, so I want to show this in the inspector. That's cool. The other thing I need are the field images for the UI for the health and the level. So another private, this will be an image, and I'll say health fill and then level fill. And this is what we're going to adjust the fill amount on to show our progress. And then just a simple reference to the player. Again, does this need to be a publicly accessible thing? No. So it can be a private, and I'm going to call it player. Well, it is a player, and then it's just going to be player. So I'm going to take this and say that yes, serialize that, and then serialize that. Now you could put it off to the side, which we may do to clean this up because we're going to have a few of these. Just like that. And then we need references to other things. But for now, let's wire this up and just get something working. We've done a lot of stuff to have nothing working. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and set up a couple listeners. So to do that, I'll have a method that's going to be update health. And this is going to take the parameters that our event is passing, which is an int for max health, then an int for, or it's the other way around, current health, and then int for max health. And that makes me think that I typed that other one backwards. I certainly did. I sure did. I'm sure you guys were yelling at me for that. Current health, max health, and then that would have been very confusing. I would not have found that later on, I'm sure. So there we go. So now I have that, and then I'll just do the things in here, but I want to set up the listener for this. So it's going to be UI event handler, and I'm going to add to the delegate, what's it called? Health something? Health changed. Well, that's the method. I'm going to add to the event of on player health change. And we're going to assign the update health. Just like that. We've done that before. No big deal. And that says, hey, Mr. Event, your delegate I am now listening for. I'm now one of the subscribed methods of. Thank you for telling me whenever anything happens that I care about. And then whenever something happens that it cares about, it'll call this method. And then in here, what I can do is set up the health stuff. My glasses fell off. So for this, I can say this.health is equal to, or to take the text, is equal to the current health, current health dot to string. So take the current health and convert it to a string and set it to the health text value. So now the UI will know I have this much health. And the other thing I want to do is I want to take these two values and convert them to a percentage that we'll then use to calculate the fill amount on our radial progress bar that we created. So I'm going to do a this.health fill. This is not, it's redundant, but it helps me to see what I'm doing. This.health fill, I'm going to do the fill amount. The property on the health fill, which is the image itself. Fill amount on that is already set to radial. So then I can set it to be a value. Now this value, we're working with two integers. We have current health and max health, which are both integers. The result that I need is a 0 to a 1, which is mathematically what I can get if I divide current health by max health, right? But them being integers, I'm not going to get a 0.5 out of it. I'm not going to get a 0.75 out of it. I'm going to get a 0 or a 1. There's no in between because they're integers. So what I can do is go ahead and cast them directly to floats, each one. So I can do current health divided by a float of max health. And that's just one way of handling it. You can cast it all together if you wanted to. And then it's going to take that and pop it over here into fill amount. And that should work. We'll see. So now whenever this happens, everything it should work for us. So if we go ahead and assign these values in the inspector, once it compiles, we'll see. There we go. Like I told you, a lot of stuff's happening already. So if I wanted to take the health text, I'll go to health, grab the value, and drop it into text for health. And then I want to take the progress bar, grab the fill, and drop it into the health fill. And I think that's all we're using currently, but while I'm already out here, I want to grab the player and drop it on player, and then I want to grab the level value and drop it on the level text field, and then grab the level fill and drop it on the level fill. Words were tough for me there. And now, what is my player's health going to be? That's a good question. I don't know how I'm even defining that. Current health is equal to max health. I'm guessing max health is defined where? 20. So it should be 20 when I start. And when I take damage, we're not updating it yet, but we will be. So it's still 28. Okay, so I'm not calling the method whenever I start. So what I want to do is in start. Actually, no. In the player, we're changing the health here, right? So one thing I could do is say, okay, after all this, I'll do the UI event handler dot health changed, and then I'll pass it my current health and my max health. From float to int. Those are floats? Why are they floats? They should not be floats. Whatever I'm using them floats for, I'll just change because they have no need to be floats. And then I'll take, whenever I take damage, after everything's said and done, I'll do a UI event handler and update the UI to reflect what damage I just took. So it'd be this dot current health. Again, this is arbitrary or redundant, but that's fine. I like to use it. And then when I die, for some reason I'm resetting my health just for fun, I guess to keep going easily. So I'll just go ahead and update that as well. And it might be better to have like an update health method down here and just call something that does all that for us. But this is how we're going to do this. So now, whenever I start, we have 0 health. And it's completely full. Yes, I love it when things don't work the way I expect them to. Especially on camera. I'm missing something obvious. Where's my player? His max health is 0. Well, then it's correct. 0. No, 30 or something. Oops. 30. There we go. And now I'm taking damage, and it's going down as you'd expect, and the progress bar is reflecting that. Pretty cool, pretty cool. When I die, it'll reset. There you go. Cool. So I don't know why my health reset there. I don't know. I may have changed. Oh, I changed it from an int to a float, or a float to an int, and that reset it in the inspector. That's why I don't like doing this inspector stuff, because if I change a name, it completely loses its link, and I have to update it in the inspector again. Things like that just drive me crazy. But for simplicity's sake, we're doing it in the inspector. At least this. Maybe not anything else, but this. So that works. Cool. The other thing I want to do is in character panel, we have all this. Let's do next. So we're going to have a list of stats, and then we are also going to be able to update those stats to new values. But the character stats themselves are not going to, at least the amount of stats and also what the stats are called, are not going to change during gameplay, right? The values will change, but how many we have won't change. So ideally, at the beginning of the game, we'll initialize our UI and we'll draw out all the stats text components, the objects, at the beginning, so that all we have to do then is go through and update the ones that exist whenever stats change, instead of having to destroy them and reinstantiate them, because that's a waste of garbage doing all that. So if we wanted to work with this, like, we could have an initialize, and all this will do, we could loop through and just create and add them to a list, and then update the list whenever something changes. So to do that, let's create a little section right here. It's going to be for the equipped, not the equipped weapon, it's going to be for the stats. And the first thing I want is it's going to be another private, since it's not need to be public. It's going to be a list of text objects, and I want to call it player stat texts. Wow. Sometimes I impress myself with my creativity, let me tell you. Text. Just like that. And then we can just add to this list whenever we initialize them. So we'll do a little for loop. Done a bajillion of these by now. We're going to initialize our integer to 0, and then we're going to say as long as it's less than our player dot character stats dot count. Whew, yeah, that's right. And then increment our integer. So for each stat that we have from the beginning of the game, because again, the character stats aren't going to change whenever we create them, they are going to exist. Even if they are 0 or negative, they are going to exist. So we have them just like that. So then what I want to do is I'm going to instantiate them and then add them to our list, but also have to have a reference to a prefab to do that. So if I wanted to have a serialized field, that's going to be a, what can I call it? Player, oops, not partial. Player stat prefab. And it's actually going to be a private. Oh, what am I doing? It's going to be just a text is what it is. Then also have to have the panel for parenting this to, right? So it's going to be parented to something. It's going to be parented to that panel, the little block that we have that is encapsulating the text elements. So this one will also be private. Serialized field, private. This is going to be a transform player stat panel. I don't usually do this, but it fits more code on the screen whenever I have it all zoomed in like this, so works out better for me that way. And this one does not need to be available in the inspector, for some reason I'm not serializing it. There's no need. So now what I can do is down here, I could take my player stats text, and add to it whatever I instantiate from the player stat prefab object. Right, so I'm taking that object, which is a text object. So this is a list of text. That makes sense. I'm instantiating it, and in the same line, I'm adding it to that list. So we already have a reference to the instantiated object in this list at the current loop index. Very cool. Very, very cool. What I can do then is I can take that object we instantiated, using that reference we already have at the index that we're currently on, and I can do a transform.setParent like we've done before, and then just set the parent to be equal to the player stat panel. And it's a transform object, so that works for us just like that. Then what I could do whenever I do this is update the values, the text values, to match what it currently is. Might make more sense to do this separately because I'll be doing this constantly throughout the game. So it makes sense to just have one method do that, and then I can just call that method from initialize stats. So if I have another thing right here, I'll just call this update stats. And in this one, we don't have to create it, right? The list already exists. We just have to have the reference to the one that we want, which would be this one right here. And then for this, I'll just grab the text property. Remember, they're all text components already, so I can just grab the text property, and I can say it's equal to whatever the string of text I want it to be equal to. So to do this, how we're going to do it is I want to go through the player, go through the character stats, and then grab the stats at whatever index we're currently on. So remember, we're creating however many stats we have, and then I'm going to say, okay, so this one's going to be the first one, this is going to be the second one, this is going to be the third one. It doesn't matter what order they're in. They're going to be in order that we define them in our character stats. So I'm going to take the stat name from the stat, and this is why we have all this set up beforehand. I know it all seemed a bit like frameworky stuff, a bit boilerplatey stuff, but it all comes down to now we can just get in there and get the information we want very easily, very quickly, and it pays off in the end. So I'm just going to concatenate, and we could use like a string.format for this, but I'm just going to concatenate on the end of this a colon, and then have player.character stats. Now it needs the value from it, right? We have the name, then we need the value. So it's going to be stats. I'm going to go off screen here. I.get calculated stat value. Again, I want to change that to something less ridiculous, but it works for now. Just make it like get value or just value or something like that. But that works for now. So now in update stats, we're doing that. Cool. So I said it would make sense just to do this once, right? So initialize stats, then I'll just call this from that. But the way we have it set up is if we call that from initialize stats, for each stat that we add, it's going to loop through each stat that we added. So what I'll just do for this is instead of looping through extra, and like I said, I could just do this right here and say, okay, now update stats. And actually, why am I saying that? I could just do it outside of the loop. I don't have to do it right when I create it. I can just go back through afterwards and update them. Duh. That was stupid of me. I'm like, oh, we should just probably just repeat it right here because that sounds clean and stuff. When in fact, I should just wait until I added them all and then go through and update them all. Yeah, it's 2 loops through all the stats, but so what? It's fine. It's that whenever we're initializing it, it doesn't happen ever again, just whenever we initialize them. So that's fine. So what I want to do now is in start, I will initialize. And there we go. So now we have stats whenever I set up the references. So now I want to set up the event for listening to this and then updating stats. So event handler on stat changed, and we're going to look for stat update or update stats, just like that. Cool. And then in Unity, we'll set up the references in the inspector. So take the stat prefab, which I don't have, and then the panel. We can go ahead and grab the panel, then we'll create the prefab. If I take the, let's see, what would this be? It would be the stats. Yes. So I'll just go ahead and delete all this. No, I don't want to delete it yet. I need the reference to the prefab. So I'm going to take this, take stats, boom. And then I'm going to go into my prefab stuff, which will be in character panel. Did we have a character panel? I may have created that off camera for some reason. I'm not sure why I would have. If not, create a character panel in the UI. And then I'm going to take that and create a prefab of that. And I'm just going to call it stat text. Stat text. And then delete all of these. Just like that. And now panel character gets a reference to that prefab. Just like that. Beautiful. Beautiful. So now, if I play the game, an error, of course. Of course, it's an error. Which makes me think we have an issue with this not existing yet. Does that mean that... Oh, a bit of debugging. Love debugging. Do a player init. We have to initialize this differently. And then character panel. We'll do a stat init. And we'll see the order of things. Stat init and then player init. So that's the issue. Player is initializing after stat. Oh boy. So stat is initializing in start, correct? So a quick way to fix this is just to initialize this in awake, unless we already have this in start for a reason. We have this in the script execution order as one of the, no, we have the UI event handler as one of the first things that gets built, I think, right? So first things that gets executed. So changing this still means that the event handler should be first. So this should be fine. Character stats, we're just using it to construct an object, so it wouldn't matter. Let's see. All right, so player init, then we have an error with the UI event handler, and then stat init. So I just said that should be fine, and it seems like it's not. So I'm calling that from start right here, right? So if we go to the execution order, this is something that's really fun, you know? This.current health, this.max health, that exists beforehand. For funsies, if this was just a start and player is here, character panel doesn't have to exist until after everything else exists. I mean, it requires the event handler to exist. It requires the player to exist. It's going to require the weapon controller to exist. So all that can be just like that. And that way we know we're not dealing with an execution order error. And this is okay the way we're doing this, because we're not going in here and moving things around and messing up any metadata of any scripts necessarily. We're changing metadata, but we're not actually changing it back and forth. All of our numbers are consistent. And if we were to just replace this there, it would update the numbers because we have 100 range in between each one, so we'll be fine with that. So if I take this and I play, I still have the error. Player initialized before stat, but now I have a health change error. What is this error? I wonder if I had this error before and I just don't remember it. Because this is happening right here, right? Without this happening, if you guys know what I'm missing, go ahead and tell me, because I'm not going to find it. It's something simple. Without that there, everything works fine. We get our power, our toughness, and our attack speed, which attack speed's too big to be displayed in the list, but that's just because my list is too thin or my words are too big. Nothing to do with anything else. But if I initialize the health, notice it's updating fine because it doesn't have to be initialized to the current value in order to work, so it's fine for now. But I'm missing something obvious, and it's 7:51 in the morning, and I've not been to bed yet because all I do is work on things. So I'm not going to sweat it in this video. It's something I'm missing somewhere. If you know what it is, just let me know in the comments, and I mean that's completely fine. I know it's something simple, so just let me know what it is, and I will be sure to change it. It sounds like a better plan than me digging through stuff right now because I am out of it. So with that change, and our stats change too, whenever I equip a weapon, I would imagine that would work. So if I equip a sword, my events are throwing errors. Okay, so what's the issue then? Well, nothing's handling it in character panel, I'm calling it. So let's see what happens. Let's see what happens when I do an equip weapon. See, it requires an item. Just like that. And then I can just do a debug.log item.item name. And then I'll listen to this from here. UI event handler dot on item equipped is equal to, or add to it the equip weapon method, just like that. And now weapon controller, I'm passing out into equip, and then eventually gets around to this, where I am then logging that name out. So if I play this, play, and then I try to equip something, cactus, equip. Okay, so that works fine. So that was the issue, nothing was listening for it, and I'm calling it saying, hey, something's listening to you. So now if I were to attack speed, too big. The stats didn't update though. You notice I equipped it and it worked fine, but my stats didn't update. So I don't even know what I have equipped or what my stats would be with it equipped. So to change that, all I have to do, the beauty of this is all I have to do is do an UI event handler dot stats changed, and that will just refresh the UI and it reload in the new stats, and it should work just like that. It's pretty cool. So the next thing I want to do is, we've got that. Now we need to do the equipment, which is the fun part because there's lots of components to that. We're already at about an hour probably, so let's jump into some more stuff. This will be equipped weapon stuff. And the first thing I want is, this can be a private as well, and we're going to be assigning it in the inspector, so we're going to serialize the field, and then I'm going to, it's going to be a default sprite. It's going to be, actually it's going to be a sprite. That's going to make it a default weapon sprite. So that sprite that we assigned to it when we laid out the UI, we're going to assign that whenever we unequip a weapon or whenever we have no weapon equipped. Pretty cool. So I take this. So this also requires a reference to the weapon controller on our player. But we can get this just from the player itself. So we'll do that. We'll just do a player weapon controller. And I'll just grab a reference to that actually in here in start. So we don't need that. And then I'll need a reference to, we're going to need the text prefab like we have for the stats for the player. A slightly different one, but mostly the same. So it's going to be a text, and I'm just going to call it weapon stat prefab. Then I also need the panel, just the same way. So it's going to be a private transform, and it's going to be weapon stat panel. Then I need a text element. It's going to be the, and I'll make sure I serialize all this here in a second. It's going to be the weapon name text. And then the reference to the image that we're going to be adding the icon to will be an image weapon icon, or equipped. No, we know that it's equipped, or just weapon icon's fine. We got the name, we got the icon, we got the prefab, we got the controller, the default. The other thing I want to need is a list of the weapon stat texts, just to keep track of them, because we're not going to be updating them actually. To keep it simple, we're going to be just destroying them and adding new ones, because each weapon can have its own stats. It can have its own amount of stats. We don't know how many it's going to have or what it is going to have. So I'll create a private, the same as I did before up there. It's going to be a list of text, and it's going to be called weapon stat texts, and just initialize the list just like that. So that's a lot of stuff to get going. So I want to copy this attribute and apply it to the things that require it. And it's going to do that, and I'm just going to let it do that because I don't feel like fighting it. I love when it knows better than I. So all these things we can add to an inspector. This one we're going to get right here by doing a player weapon controller is equal to player dot get component player weapon controller, like that. Now does player have a reference to weapon controller? Maybe we should set that up in the player itself. Nah, it's fine. So there's that. And now the rest we'll do in the inspector. But before then, I want to go ahead and get everything set up in here. So I'm going to do an update equipped weapon. I don't need that. I'm going to use equip weapon that we already wrote for the testing. It's going to be update equipped weapon. Then we're going to take the sprite. Dot sprite is equal to resources. Dot load. We'll do the same thing here that we've done before. It's going to be a sprite. We're going to be going through the UI items, or what is it called? UI items icons, I think. No, I think it's UI icons items. And then it's the object slug. So it's going to be item.object slug. Just like that. And we're going to set the actual. No, that already is the sprite. Oh my. That's not what I meant to type in at all. Icon? What is it called? Weapon icon. Dot sprite is equal to the value of that. I don't know what I was doing there. I was not paying attention, that's for sure. Then we want to do the actual text, so it'd be weapon name text dot text is equal to item dot item name. Simple enough. And now for the stats, we can pretty much copy what we're doing up here. So we're just going to take this. I don't know what that was for. We'll take this right here, and we're just going to do it again. But we're going to do it inside of update equipped weapon. We don't need the method. I don't know why I did that. I don't know why. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. So do this, and then we're also going to do this though inside of here. All kinds of fun stuff happening. So what we have is both of those methods condensed into one. Because we're not going to be able to update these afterwards because we don't know how many we're going to need. We could do some object pooling, but we're keeping it too simple for that. So if I were to do this, I want to add this to the weapon stats text lists, and then just reference that list, just like that. And then we're going to reference the item stats, just like that. I'll leave it to be stats. Just like that. Beautiful, perfect, great. And then that's why it's good to have the stat system be the same for all things, because we can do that easily. And then the parent is going to be the weapon stat panel. And the prefab is going to be the weapon stat prefab. And the amount of these that we're going to do is going to be based on the amount of stats on our weapon. There we go. So item stats count. So now for each item, or for each stat on our item, it's going to add one thing and then update the text to represent that. So now if we hook all this up in the inspector, which I believe to be the last thing we have to hook up, what we'll get, panel character, update equipped weapon. So I'm going to go into my character panel, and I want to go to my weapon, my stats, boom. I'm going to call this weapon stat text, and then delete all these. And then I want to take back up to panel character, add the prefab to the prefab. Default weapon sprite, I believe it is to be in items for some reason. And then weapon stat panel will be the weapon stats. Then weapon name text will be the actual text inside of that right there. And the icon will be the image. So we took all that stuff and assigned it to the inspector right over there. Pretty cool. I'm going to go ahead and save that because we've got a lot of stuff happening. And We should see if that works or not. I apologize if we're about 7 hours into this video by now. If I equip something. Okay. So it added my stats. Don't know why this is attack. I guess because speed got cut off. And then the icon is null. What am I doing in there for? UI icons. Believe it to be icons. If I equip a weapon now, boom, there's our icon. Power, toughness, and attack is cut off because I guess it's too small or our text is too big. What I'll do just for fun, because I know I don't feel like fixing the UI and like making it bigger or whatever. You can do that if you want to, but I'm going to just leave my source up. I'm just going to go to my JSON and my items, and I'm going to rename attack speed. The name part of it's going to be attack speed. No, it's not pretty, but just make it work. And then on our character stats, whenever we create our stats, I want to go to the definition of our character stats and see we have the names here. So I'll make sure this name is attack speed. And that's just a name. I think we're using this for all the assigning, so that should be fine. I say that, and then everything's going to burst into flames. So attack speed, then I want to equip something. Power, 800, toughness 2, attack speed is 1. Then I want to equip my sword. Adds my staff back to my inventory, and there's my sword stats. And notice these stats are also updating to go along with it. Pretty cool, but what if I want to equip this weapon, or unequip this weapon? Quickly, I'm going to do that. What I can do for this is I'm going to have a method in here. It's going to handle telling what to do, telling the weapon controller what to do. So if I do an unequip weapon, something like that. Now this needs to be public because I'm going to be assigning it to the event system on a button. And we're going to just reset some values quickly. Just a rough way to go about it, but you know, it's going to work. It's going to be weapon name text is equal to, or text is equal to nothing. Or I could say nothing equipped. Or I could just put like a dash or whatever you want to do. And then I'll set the sprite back to the empty sprite, right? So it'd be weapon icon dot sprite is equal. That's why I assigned the default sprite to default weapon sprite. And then we'll go to our weapon controller and tell it to unequip it so it updates all the stats and stuff for us. But before we get there, I want to go ahead and remove all the stats, the text elements at least. Well, not remove them. It's a good question. Should I just delete them? Because we add them for each thing we add, so it shouldn't matter. We can just clear them out. If we were to do a weapon stats texts dot clear, and then in our weapon controller, I'll have it unequipped down here somewhere. Why is there update down here? Oh, because it's just for testing. I'll have it unequipped right here. That's going to be a public void unequip weapon. And what this is going to do is pretty much what this is doing right here. So what I can do is just take this and put this down here and then just call unequip weapon right here. So now this, whenever this happens, instead of running the code in there, it's going to run it out here. That way I can also use this code from our UI to unequip something. So it's going to give us back the item, then it's going to remove the stats of the equipped weapon, then it's going to destroy the item that we have currently equipped physically, and that's what we want to happen whenever we unequip. So let's make sure this is all looks all good. I don't know, whenever I say that, it doesn't turn out to be all good. So what I'll then do is close this gap for one, and then I'll do a weapon controller unequip weapon. And if everything works out, this will be the end of this video. Alright, so if I equip a weapon, boom, bada boom, then I want to, well, I don't have a button for this yet, but then I'll click on this and it'll unequip it. So what I can do that really fast is if I were to select this image, one reason I love this component-based approach, especially with UI and stuff like this, is I can just go to this and I can say, hey, I want to make this into a button. And I can add a button to it. And even if I was doing this in code, I could just add component button and it would make it into an interactable button. Just like that I can apply click events to. And it's just as easy as that. You know what I mean? That's crazy. So if I take this now, drag that down there and say, okay, you're going to be reacting to yourself, character panel, and I'm going to do an unequip weapon. So now if I were to do this and this and this and then click that, it's going to unequip it. My stats didn't update though. That's fine. It's a quick change. All I have to do is go into Repo controller. I'm going to take this thing that updates stats with. Bada bing, bada boom. And I'm going to go ahead and apologize if, you've already watched the video at this point, but if I didn't edit a lot of things out, I'm just extremely tired and I want to get this done, and I know you guys want to see it. So me not editing everything out makes it a bit easier to do so. So I'd remove the stats from my player, but these are still there. So my idea of just destroying them this way didn't seem to work because it's not destroying the actual instantiated game objects. It's just going to be destroying the references. So what I can do is, what I was going to do to begin with, just loop through these real fast. I is less than the weapon stat texts, then I++, and then for each one, just do make that a count. I'll do that in a second. Weapon stat texts I. Then we could destroy them, or we could just set the values to be equal to nothing. Let's see about destroying them. And then we'll make this into count. Equip, unequip. Cool. Everything's working out great. So you see a little dash that I have there. You can make that say, like I said, nothing equipped, or just make it not say anything. Whatever you want to do. And you can make the stats have something there showing that there's nothing to display. But I'm not going to because I am out of time. Alright, so I expect yours to have, assuming you're going to have like a full-on game, you're going to have more stats than me. You're going to have a prettier interface. You know, mine's all very simple. I mean, it looks cool. It looks good for a concept kind of thing. Like I wouldn't be against having this in a demo or an early access kind of thing. But I definitely wouldn't publish a game with this kind of interface. But you know, I wouldn't mind seeing what you are working on. I know everybody's following this series, so you probably have something similar, right? But I've seen a couple of people's RPGs to this point, and they're all different. It's cool to see that people are taking their own approaches. A guy just recently shared his RPG, and he's on like episode 4 at this point, he said, on the forum, and there's just so many cool things already. And he has like an actual thing going, you know, it's not just my little framework that I have. He's building a game on top of it, and he has dialogue that means stuff, and it's going to be cool to see what he can do after that. So what I'm saying is I want to see what you are working on. If you wouldn't mind, like, if you could make a build or something, and like an HTML5 build, and upload that to somewhere that we could play and share it on the forum, and I could check it out and see what you guys are doing. I think that'd be really cool to do, just see where everybody's at, see what kind of creative freedom people are taking with this, because that's what I want people to do is take what I've done and then make something cool from it. Because this isn't that cool on its own, you know, but it's a good basis, it's a good base framework to make other cool things on top of. So if you could do that and share it on the forum, that'd be awesome. Also, if you have any questions, you know, forum.goggamegrind.com. Make an account, ask a question. Lots of discussion happening over there, so it'd be great to have some more people to chime in on things and to ask questions and answer questions. Could always use the help over there as well, answering questions. If you want to support the channel and help me make content, the best way to do that financially is through patreon.com/GameGrind. couple cool rewards for you. If you are at the $15 tier currently, you get Journal and Stat Track, 2 of my assets, for free. Actually, for a good discount as well. And all the other, like the Discord and the exclusive print tutorials. It's pretty cool, so check it out. And then facebook.com/GoGameGrind. It's enough plugging for the day. Thank you guys for watching. My name is Austin, and I will see you next time.